Hey guys, Chris here, and making my first video for YouTube, doing a power steering pump on my 08 Ford Taurus. It's SEL with all-wheel drive. I believe this job will apply to the limited all-wheel drive as well. So basically I'm doing the power steering pump. I have done the rack and pinion and the high pressure line. Just real quickly, first I'm gonna go over, the high pressure line and the power steering pump. If there's any requests for the rack and pinion, I can show you guys how to do that too. I did, just to summarize, I did have to just loosen the back three or four bolts back here, 3 or 4 bolts back here on the subframe. And then that kind of just let it droop down enough for me to get the one out, then put this one in. So basically, looks like I just had a bad power steering pump, and the one that I got from the parts store was also bad. So basically, to get this high pressure line off, I just, remove my battery tray. That's like 1 or 2, I believe 15 millimeters. Or maybe 3 15 millimeters, and then there was a 10 millimeter, kind of like this. You just hold it like that while you loosen it right there. Pretty simple. Get the battery tray out of the way. Then I just removed this air box from here, and that gave me enough room to get into. You can see it right there, sun shining on it real bright. The one on the right here, let me use my shadow as a pointer. This bolt right here, take that off. That's one of the bolts holding the high pressure line onto the rack and pinion. And then I have my old rack and pinion right here. As you see, this is what it kind of looks like. The 2 lines come into here, and then they're both held on by a bracket that goes across. You just take this middle bolt out. It's a 10 millimeter. You should be able to crack it loose with 2 wrenches and then get it all the way off with a wrench. It is a pain in the butt. That is for sure a pain in the butt. And then you just kind of tug on the hose and it'll pop out of its spot. Now for the power steering pump, I'm actually just about done with it right now. Just to briefly go over the tools. So the bracket bolts, let me jump back to that on the high pressure line. There's another bracket bolt. Well, it's a nut right there in the center of the screen, if it would ever focus. There we go. There's a stud on a thing. I don't have it all the way down. It's a nut on a stud, and that just holds it right there. This clip, pretty basic stuff. You just, I'm slipping. You just push this down, pull it off. Very basic. That's about the same way that the one on the power steering pump is. Okay. And I think it's just those 2 brackets, I believe. There might be a 3rd bracket, I'm not so sure of. But those are 5/16. And I got it with this, stubby. It's real helpful to be able to use a stubby. 5/16 bolts. And then 10 millimeter on the one holding it on the rack and pinion. Not really much in the way of tools that you need for just the power steering pump. Now I'm going to go on to that. 13 millimeter. I've lost all mine, so had to use it like this. Just one of these extensions, either or will do, or you could use one like this. Now I use this wrench, I'll go over that a little bit later, and then just a 3/8 ratchet. You'll also need a 18 millimeter flare nut remover, or also called a crow's foot. So that's what this looks like. I picked up this set at O'Reilly's. It's about $32. Seems a little extreme for just needing this 18 mil. So basically this is for the high pressure hose. Can be a B word if you let it be, but really the secret for that is you take it off 3 bolts to start with. Well, first you get this serpentine belt off, or stretch belt. In order to get that stretch belt off, you just grab a flathead screwdriver. I forgot to list that in the parts. Flathead screwdriver, you know, wedge it in like this, turn the motor over so it gets up here, up on top, and it's pressed in between, then pry it off like that. Fairly basic. And to get it on, you got a couple ways you could do that. I'm not going to go over that in this video because there is stuff on that. So the bolts that you have to take off, so there's a shorter, fatter one, kind of like me, this 13 right here, easy peasy to get to. That's a 10 millimeter. And then at the top of this power steering pump, my flash is not coming on, but at the top of this pump there's an electric clip. Now this right here is the what it clips into. Now the bolts behind this, and this slides, you might not be able to tell, but slides forward and backwards, you know, like this. Slides this way, slides that way. It'll slide all the way down so you can get to the bolt that's behind it. And that one is a 10 millimeter, as well as this one. Get in there with an extension. It's not that hard. You do have to unclip it first, and the clip is a basic clip. At the top there's a little tab that you push. Now optional, you can remove that blue thing, which is your catalytic converter, oxygen sensor. I don't know why I said catalytic converter, but yeah, you can pop that off, give yourself a little bit of room. You either do or don't, doesn't really matter. And then on that hose right there, that's your low pressure hose. It's just a squeeze clamp. Push it, pull it off. It is always a pain in the ass going on and coming off. So once you get this off and you take the bolts off, you take that electric clip off, and you take that low pressure hose off, drop it down, kind of tug on it so you get a little bit right here, spin it around, and then you're gonna set your flare nut on it, crack it loose. Once you crack it loose, well, you're probably gonna need to grab your a pry bar. That's another tool you're gonna need. Grab your pry bar, put it between the fins of the wheelie boy, and then crack it loose. Once you get it loose, I found I was able to get it off with this, and then the hardest part of this job is going to be getting it back on. So you're going to have to spin, kind of sit like this. I don't have a jack, I don't have a nice, you know, what's it called, a lift or anything, you know, I'm a broke kid. Brought it down to about here, spun it around so that the wheels, you know, over here, and then grab this, or, well, it was actually really, really hard. I had to position it, lift it up to the thing, start getting it threaded. Once you know you got it threaded on there correctly, and it's not going to start, you know, cross-threading. That brings me to my next point, sorry. Let's go back one step. This is your little Teflon thing. It's kind of a pain to get on, but basically you kind of slide it on, and you're going to have to, you know, really get it on there with your fingernails, one thread at a time onto the bolt. That's not the bolt you're going to put it on, obviously, but just for reference. Where'd I flick it? This one might be better for reference. So it's going to be a lot like, you know, you it's a tight fit. I don't know how to say it. Then once you get it threaded on by hand, which is going to be a major pain in the butt, I tightened it the rest of the way with just this. I had enough room to, you know, keep doing it like that and readjusting. And thing is, you can spin it, so you got the maneuverability on it. And then you feed it back up, set it on. It sits on some little lips. I don't know if we can see it. It sits on a little stud, you know, over here, and up at the top there's a long stud protruding out that, you know, you got to get the pump up to and get that top right bolt hole over that stud. I don't think that stud is going to have a nut or anything on it. It's just a stud going through the pump, kind of like lining it up, and then there's only 3 bolts that are actually on the pump. So after you get that, and then you put your low pressure line back on, you're good to go. I would suggest, if you're doing this job, to just pull the high pressure line off and make sure it's not clogged up or anything. It's a rather small hole. I dropped my fender down, but I really didn't need to. There really wasn't a need to do this. You could just leave your fender on. I don't know if it's supposed to have something right here, but mine didn't. Well, it probably did at one point, but you know, that's kind of where it's at. And then when you're done with that, you're gonna open your power steering reservoir. Once you got everything snugged up, belts back on, your stretch belt, that is, snug back on, top it up with power steering fluid, leave the cap off, start it up, spin it from wheel lock to wheel lock, which means all the way to one side, all the way to the other. Do that about 50 times, and hopefully you have power steering. It's very, very depressing when you don't after doing all this, especially since I did my rack and pinion, and it was my pump all along, it looks like. So another thing, check your pumps when you get them from the store. Pour some fluid in both sides, in the high pressure and the low pressure side. Grab a drill with a hex bit, put it in the center of the pump, in the center of the wheel, and use a drill on it, spin it over real quick. Make sure that fluid comes out before you go putting it back on, because it really will hurt your feelings. So anyways, what I'd say about this job, scale of 1 to 10 on difficulty, I'd say it's a low difficulty, but you know, it's, if you're impatient and stuff like that, it's going to be harder, because it's a very frustrating job. Actually, it's more of a mentally hard project, not really a physically one. There's not a lot of room for most of this stuff. You're going to get sore hands going back there. But anyways, that's my video. Let me know how I did. I haven't ever made a guide video, but I figured I do a lot of jobs that there aren't any guides for, and people like me would appreciate. So let me know how you guys felt about it.